My full name is Lawrence Avery Furlonger. I'm commonly known as Laurie. Have been since birth, I guess. I was born September the 30th, 1930, in Toronto. I came to Schreiber, babe in arms. I just don't know exactly when. I could have been early 1931. My grandfather, Furlonger, was born in northern England. I think it's called Alnwick. And I believe my grandmother was from that area. She may have been from Newcastle, but northern England anyway. I'm not really sure where she was born. Yeah, I believe my mother was born right here in Schreiber. I'm not sure. And my father was born in northern England. He was born in Gateshead. I got married in September 1956 in Swan River, Manitoba. My spouse's name was Laurie Marks. She was when I met her, she was a nurse in the Swan River Hospital. And she passed away in 1984. I was still in the RCMP, and I met Karen. She was working in the RCMP building in Ottawa. And after my wife passed away, and then I continued to live in Ottawa, and then we struck up another relationship, and we moved here. I have 4 children. The eldest is Craig. He was born in 1959. He's presently living in Kimberley, British Columbia. He's actually he lives in Kimberley, but he works in Cranbrook at the hospital. He's in maintenance there. My daughter, Karen, was born in Craig was born in Winnipeg. Karen was born, my daughter Karen, with a C, was born in Winnipeg. She is currently working at the Princess Margaret Hospital in cancer research. The next one, my son William, he was born in Winnipegosis, Manitoba. He is presently living in Medford, Oregon. And my youngest son, Bruce, he was born in Halifax, 1970. Yeah, November 1970. And he's presently living in Vancouver. I have one granddaughter, Ivy. She's 3 years old. That's my son Bruce's daughter. Yes, I enlisted in the RCMP in June 1949, and I retired after 35 years in 1984. I volunteered just briefly with the town of Schreiber. It was to do with the zoning anyway. There was 3 or 4 of us, but we haven't been called for that for a number of years. I sat for a few years on the legal aid board in Thunder Bay for I think about 5 years, and then my wife and I had started to go to Arizona for the winter, and because of that, it seemed that was the busiest time with the legal aid, so I just finally had to resign from that. It was a very enlightening time. Met a lot of nice people, learned an awful lot. Oh boy. That's a tough one. But I guess really just the freedom that we had as kids. We made our own fun. We didn't expect to be chauffeured everywhere. If we we spent a lot of time fishing, riding our bicycles. When we'd go fishing. Lots of times we'd on the weekends, maybe a Friday night, we'd pack up a lunch or a little bit of food, and we'd go up north here to Snake Falls, and lots of times we'd just build a little bit of a brush shack, and we'd spend the night there, and we'd fish. Our parents never, I suppose they were worried about us, but they weren't overly concerned because they figured, number one, back there we weren't going to get into any mischief, and it was just part of growing up, I guess. In the winter time, I wasn't a hockey player, but in the wintertime, we did a lot of skiing. There was, long before cross-country skiing became a big fad, we used to ski down to we knew was as the Gold Range mine, the North Shore, down there, and then we'd go back different places, snowshoeing. 6 of us built a log cabin back it was near what is north of here, at Longworth Lake. Now, I don't know how far that is, but we built it all, and that was I don't know how long it took us to walk out there, but when the snow came, one of the guys, Benny Daniels, had a sleigh, big sleigh, I don't know how long it was. We hauled all the lumber back, for the floor and the roof, and that would be a day in and a day out, so that's one of the things that we did. Like I said, we'd go fishing. We'd fish, where I'm living now, what was called Hump's Hole was a great spot to fish. We fished in Crooked Creek, and our mothers would pack us lunch, or we'd make a lunch, and away we'd go for the day. So I guess that's about it. We never got into any real mischief. I know that we used to torment the town policeman a little bit as kids, but I think he kind of looked forward for something to do to chase us around. Eh? We'd see him coming, and we'd run, and he'd come after us. And no way he was going to catch us, but it was lots of fun. It was Bill Webb. It'd be Brian Webb's grandfather. He was. I can hear him saying, "I'll catch you, I'll wrap my billy around your arse." But, is that printable? Like I said, we never got into any mischief, but there was a fellow by the name of Blake Edmonds. He was a mailman. He used to pick up the mail and take it to the post office. And he had a garden up, where are we? Just up above the building here, up above the ball field. He had a little garden there. And lots of times we'd sneak up there after dark, and we'd dig up a few potatoes, and we'd build a little fire. We never did any damage, and we'd roast a few potatoes, maybe half a dozen of us. I think there's only one person left of that crew, and I don't want to name that one, but that's it. Let's see. One summer, it must have been 1945. There was a big fire up the Akwesasne River, and the forestry guy came up to both the high school and the public school, and they loaded us all on a truck and sent us home, get some clothes, and they flew us out to that fire. And all they had at the time, they didn't have everything there. And they issued us with some blankets and a tarpaulin. There was no tent. We just slept on the ground there for a couple of days underneath that tarpaulin. And I know it was 1945 because there was a whole bunch of German prisoners up there. They had brought them, I believe they were cutting pulp. I think that's what they were doing in one of those camps. And the fire drove them out, and they came down to where we were, and I can remember a whole bunch of those German prisoners. I think about it today, there's no way they'd do things like that. They just took those young kids, 16 years old, dumped them out in the bush, and but there was nobody here. All the young men were away at the war, and so we were cannon fodder, so to speak. After I left school, I didn't finish, unfortunately. I never finished high school. I went to work for the railway, like a lot of kids. About 1944, I guess, like I said, all the young men were away. So I remember my cousin and I, Chow McQuaig, we were hired by the town. And at that time, there used to be we helped the town. I guess it was Eddie Lawson, Mr. Eddie Lawson. He was one of the town maintenance men. And Milty Winters, I recall, excuse me, he must have taken a leave of absence from the railway. I just don't know how that came about. But at any rate, he had a truck, and I remember he would drive us around, and we did some work up at Walker's Lake. And then we did some other work, and Alec Lamb was the caretaker at the old town hall. He was going away on holiday or something, so I filled in for him cleaning the building such as it was, and they had a weigh scale. I don't know if you would recall that, right beside just beside the town hall, off to one side, and Joe Figlamini, Little Joe as we knew him, he hauled coal, so he'd come and get me, and he'd drive his truck on, and I had to see how much coal he had on there, so he could. I guess he probably filled out the bill to whoever he was delivering it to. And then I remember we had to clean out the furnace. That thing really sticks in my mind. There was a pit or a clean out about that big, and we had to crawl in there, and there was about that much soot in there. We'd take turns in there, fill the pail out, pass it out, dump it into something else. And when we were come out of there, we were just as black as your boot. And I remember Milty Winters saying, "You can't ride in the cab, you got to sit in the back." Took us up so we could go swimming and get washed at Walker's Lake. But I guess that's about it. And then I said I went to work for the railway 2 summers. Myself and 3 other fellas, Bill Randa, who's now passed away, Bruce Reed, same thing, passed away, and his brother Don. We worked 2 summers for, at that time it was called the Long Lac Pulp and Paper. That's even before they were considering building Terrace Bay as it is now. They were, what they would do, apparently they would cut the pulp in the wintertime along Long Lake, put it on take it out on the ice, and then it would come down. And we had a gate there that they would call on the land. They had a phone there that you didn't talk on a wet day because it was just a wire, and if a branch hit it, it would just about take your head off. But anyway, they would call up and they'd say, "Well, open the gate for 8 hours," or well, I guess they knew how much wood they needed, and it would come down to the mouth where I guess the boat launch is today at Terrace Bay. And then I'm not sure, but I do believe they boomed it there, and they may have taken it out to the Slade Islands and loaded it at that point. And I think they took it across to I guess it was the Kimberly Clark Mill or whatever it was at that point. I think in Wisconsin. I don't really recall that. So we'd worked there 2 summers, and that was an experience too, And as I said, after I left school, I worked for the railway. I started working the freight shed, and then for Gwen Hadley, you may recall Gwen Hadley, she was a school teacher for her father, and then I worked over in the baggage department. And from there, I went to the RCMP. My cousin had joined the year before, and another chap by the name of Reg Payette. He must have gone about maybe 1947 or thereabouts. I'm not really sure. And that's where I began my career. Like I said, we went fishing. We rode our bicycles. We just went exploring the bush, We were never worried about bears and that sort of thing in those days, But there wasn't the garbage around. I guess that must be it, because, the bears were never a real problem that I recall. And I remember there was a bear wandering around, and Jack Handel, he and somebody else, I guess Jack Handel only had one arm, and I can remember them shooting a bear. They stayed up at night and they waited till that bear came out and they shot it. And that's about the only time I really remember. Oh, and I know, as kids we used to go down to the dump and shoot rats. So it was always lots of fun. There was you never ran out of rats, you ran out of ammunition, but there was always lots of rats. But then they eradicated that problem, so fortunately they're not around anymore. We had we made our own fun, and that was about it. And like I said, then I went to the RCMP and I moved around a lot. Oh boy. Well, I think the big thing is kids don't get out and play. They got that damn thing and their thumbs are going all the time. I think that's a big thing. Like, it seems to me that like we were involved in sports and like I said, we explored in the bush. The kids don't seem to do that now. They seem to be, unless you can be driven to where they want to go, they won't walk. Well, a good example is they bring kids from this side of town to school in a damn school bus, like, and then they wonder why kids' obesity seems to be a problem. Like, I lived, well, where I lived, in the south side of town, and we walked to school. It didn't matter if it was raining or if it was 30 below, you walked to school. And I think that was one of the big things. Technology, I guess, has really changed. God, we'd listen to the radio in the evening, and that was about it. There was no TV to distract you or things like that. And I think that's the big thing. There's, like I said, it seems to me that kids want to be hand-fed. They just do not want to be disturbed. If they're going, like I said, if they're going someplace, they don't want to walk. They got to be driven. I can't remember the last time I saw a kid riding his bicycle with a fishing rod. So, or even walking with a little pack sack. So, you asked about memories of growing up as a youngster. I remember. Do you remember the Baptist church? Just down next to the bank there? Oh, maybe not, eh? Probably not, Linda. Let's see, Bill Campbell, Annette Campbell had the flower shop there. Okay, the bank is here, and then there's a couple of buildings, and then there's that building that you go down, and there's a basement. That was the old Baptist church. And God, he finally, the minister, I remember him, his name was Reverend Weaver. He was just a young chap. And I don't know how long he was here, but I remember going to the Baptist church and, we went out on picnics down, oh, God, here we go again. Picnics down to Schreiber Beach. My uncle had a truck. And we'd all bail onto that on Sunday, and everybody, it was like potluck. Down we'd go and spend the day there. Even the kids would go in, maybe swimming a little bit. But like I remember the Baptist church, we'd go there, and I remember, and I was just a kid, but I remember going the evening they used to have hymn sings there, and but then, times got so tough that they just could not afford to keep. I guess it just couldn't afford to keep the minister, and he finally went back. I believe he went to Montreal, but I don't really recall. But I remember that they had I guess kind of like the altar, and they had a tank in there where they baptized kids. So, but I was probably baptized there, but I don't remember. So that was another one of the fond memories. And I remember, but I remember one thing that always sticks in my mind. There was the Moon family lived up just about where the medical center is now. They had a house there. There was, I don't know, there was Bill and George, and I think Ed. That was the father, and there might have, I think maybe there was another Ed, but I'm not sure. But I remember him playing the xylophone there. He used to come to the church there. My aunt Ines played the piano, I guess, but I remember at the back they'd be, in the evening they'd be having hymn sings, I guess, or whatever you want, and he'd play the xylophone. But yeah, there was George and Bill, but they went off to the war, and those boys built a. Oh boy, here we go. I still remember. Now, if something tweaks your memory, they had built a almost like a snowplane. Like it was they had a big old car, a truck motor in the back with a big propeller, and it was up on skis, and they could, I don't know where they went. When I was real young, they didn't plow the streets. They had a huge big roller, I don't know how big it was, with slats in it, and Charlie Ryan, I believe it was Charlie Ryan, he had a horse, and he'd sit up there on a seat, and they'd just roll that and pack the streets down. And of course the deliveries were made by somebody pulling a sleigh or a team like Arthur Message. He had that store almost right next to Spinoni's, and then I guess hard times caught up to him as well. Oh boy. Oh, well, I know. As kids, they had the bowling alley in the basement of the YMCA, and we'd go there, and I guess my cousin Chal, McQuaig, Bill Madge, we were all pin setters there, so we'd go there, and then after, I know we probably made 50 cents in the evening. We'd go over to Louis. The Chinese gentleman there had a cafe. I don't know, there was Spinoni's, and then I don't know if it was Message's store, and then Louis, as we called it, I think he called it the Rex Cafe. We'd go there and have toast and coffee, sometimes apple pie, or sometimes raisin pie. He was quite a character, a nice old gentleman, really a nice fella. He was always treated us kids good. And also at that time, oh no, I guess it was a little earlier, the original post office was on that street as well. It was, like I said, there was Spinoni's, and then Messages, or the Chinese gentleman, Louis, and then the post office, and then there was that old vacant lot that was boarded up for years. There was an old safe in there. I don't know where it came from, but as kids we'd go there and we'd twiddle it, twist on that dial. And so, but one of those things you just remembered. Beside the restaurant in the YMCA, which used to produce really good meals, there was, and like I said, there was the Chinese place, and then there was Mrs. St. Jean over here. And then for a while there was a place called the Shamrock Cafe, and it was run by a couple called Humphreys. And it was right about where Karen Figlamini's got that, that speech office or whatever it is, right there. They had that cafe right there. In fact, my uncle had a pool room there for a while after, or before, I don't remember. And then we had a shoemaker here. But that's another thing I remember as a kid. Andy McGillsky, or Andy McGill as he changed his name to, he was like a cobbler, and we lived across the street at that point. And I used to go and sit there and watch him, fixing shoes and things like that. Not really, not anymore. I used to do a lot of leather work, but then I sort of, kind of gave that up. And I like to read a lot, as you probably know. And Age is catching up to me, so I can't do a lot that like. I used to have a cabin back north of here, and we had that for a number of years, but it just got to be, like I say, you hate to admit it, but old age catches up, and there's, the work, putting up wood and one thing and another just got to be too much of a chore. It wasn't, no, it was a chore, it wasn't fun anymore, so. Be about 1946, maybe, there was a murder back, I think they called it the Antelope Mine, but we always referred to it as the Cooks Lake Gold Mine. And one day there was an OPP officer, and I can't remember who it was now, met me on the street or whatever, and he said, could you do us a favor? And I said, excuse me, I said, oh yeah, sure, what was it? He said, there's two young fellas from Toronto out there guarding that murder scene till the snow melts so that they could do a search. And he said, we have some mail. He said, would you mind going out there? And that was a 4-mile walk, whatever. So I said, okay. So I think I took my snowshoes, and away we went. I probably had to snowshoe a little bit, but not that far. So I got out there, and there are these two young lads from Toronto. I think they were from Toronto, Southern Ontario someplace. And I gave them the mail, we talked, and we had a cup of tea or something, and it was getting kind of late then, not all that late, but then they said, we got a bear here, and we're frightened of the bear. And I said, well, I shouldn't be worried about a bear, here in Bushman. And just about that time, there was a trapper, I think he was a trapper, a prospector going through, and they said, well, why don't you stay overnight? So I stopped the guy, I said, would you mind telling my parents that I'm going to stay here? So he said, okay. Well, 7 o'clock came, no Laurie, 8 o'clock came. My dad started to get a little bit concerned, and he didn't know what to do, and I guess he was going to get a hold of the police, and the fellow all of a sudden, geez, I was supposed to take a hold of Bill Furlonger. So he came, told my dad, so then that was all right. So I walked into town, and that day, and then I don't know if it was the next day or what, we came back, and these young lads were frightened of that bear. So I said, well, they had a rifle there, so I walked out, and I said, well, if you're worried about it, I said, I'll shoot it. Well, it hadn't come out, so I got a hold of some birch bark. They knew it was denned up. I smoked it out and shot the bear, and then, we pulled it away, and I could hear something, and there was 3 cubs in there. So we pulled them out and carried them into town, my pack sack, and my mother said, what are you going to do with those? So we had a dog, and the dog was going crazy. So we had them in the basement for a day, and she said, you got to get rid of them. So, and I don't know how this all came about. It's all kind of hazy, but somehow we found out about the zoo in Winnipeg. I thought it was in St. Vital for some reason. That's the reason it sticks in my head. And so we bundled them up and sent them off on the train to that, wherever it was. St. Vital's part of Winnipeg anyway, but I don't know that they went to the Winnipeg Zoo, and that's what I said. For some reason, St. Vital sticks in my head, and I'd never heard of it, until that point. But that's what was happened there, and that's where the 2 prospectors that were murdered there by that fellow by the name of Chuck Martin. I think he was the last person hung around here. That he was hung in Port Arthur. I don't know what's down the road for Schreiber, to be quite honest with you. It's I don't know what we can do, as even as citizens, to try and make it better. It just seems that, to me, that they're pricing themselves right out of business. The taxes keep going up, and we don't seem to be gaining anything. There's businesses closing, everything's, like we just lost scales or skellies or whatever you want to call them. And you know, like when I grew up, there was I think it was Kingston, and then Charlie Nesbitt ran the grocery store. Messages had a grocery store. Tody Kakamo had a grocery store. Hastings had a grocery store, and there was a fellow in here called Bargain Johnny's for a while. You never had to worry, and you know, and if you were doing something wrong, or little, you know, kind of crossing the line a little bit before you got home, your parents knew about it. You know, so it was things like that. You know, you never had to worry about going out at night, you know, and things like this. And I think kind of everybody looked after one another, you know what I mean, more or less. You know, keep your eye on that young Laurie Furlonger, what's he up to, you know. I think another big thing is the drug factor, you know, and it's here. You know, everybody said the police aren't doing anything, but from experience I know that, you know, you can't be everywhere all the time. And, you know, what they're seeing here is nothing. You know, it's a big thing here, but it's nothing in the whole sphere. I recall, you know, in the 50s when maybe the drug scene was just kind of getting, maybe, I don't say it started, you know, if you know what I mean, but it was really nothing, and I was in Winnipeg at that time, you know. So we only had a few people that were, you know, dedicated to that aspect. But a lot of people are anti this nuclear waste business, you know, and I don't know, really, I don't know if that's a good thing. I'll never see it come to fruition because, you know, they say, what is it, 2035 or something? You know, I'd be 105 if I was still around, but it's got lots of pros and cons. I mean, is it a cash cow for the town? Or, you know, I would like, you know, in a way I would like to see it. If it's going to, you know, breathe new life into the town, I would like to see that. But then on the other hand, I'm a little skeptical. I think, I don't know, that maybe the present regime is trying, you know, I think for years that they just kind of went along, and like when you see what's happened in Terrace Bay, you know, and that was another thing. We could have had all that if it had to been, you know, for a stubborn old couple of people that didn't want a mill town. You know, we could have been a thriving community, but that's water under the bridge.